if you're going to take anything from this video, it is this. And it's something that you should avoid doing. And for some reason, a lot of study tubers seem to recommend doing this, and I just completely disagree. Do not waste your time on... Hello, it's Jeta, and welcome to the first video in the Back to School series for 2021. So in this video, I thought I would give you 10 tips for if you are starting year 10 or year 11. And these are just things that you should know before starting your GCSE years, and also mistakes to avoid. Because obviously I made some mistakes on the way, and if you can avoid those things by watching this video, then it would be really good. So tip number 1 is just to enjoy your time through GCSEs, especially in year 10, but also in year 11. You actually have a lot more time than you think you have, and you just shouldn't stress too much about all this revision that you need to be doing, and you have so much more time than you think you do. So join clubs, socialize with your friends, keep up with your hobbies, because you will actually still have time for all of these things, as well as revising for your GCSEs. And I don't say this to brag, this is just an example. As well as revising and doing homework for my GCSEs, I was also doing YouTube. I did the Duke of Edinburgh Award, I did yoga club, I tutored year 7s in maths, and I still managed to get grades that I'm really happy with. So even if you're doing all of these extra things, which honestly you need to do, because if you're only doing revision, you will drive yourself crazy and you will burn out so quickly. But even whilst doing these things, you're still going to be able to get grades that you're really proud of and that you're happy with, as long as you find a way to balance your time. The second tip is something that I did do in year 11, but I didn't do in year 10, and that is to revise for every single exam that you have. So whether it's a quiz, a end of topic test, a mock, or even like a end of year exam, revise as if it's your real GCSE. Because if you are revising for every single exam throughout all 2 years, when it comes to your actual final GCSE exams, you will actually not have to do as much revision, because you've already done the revision and all you're doing is just recapping what you've already revised. And in my opinion, this is even better revision than making resources throughout the year. If you just actively revise for every single exam, that is probably the best source of revision you can be doing, because when it comes to your final GCSE exams, all the revision that you've done prior to that in the past 2 years will just come back to you. This is what happened in my final history GCSE exam. Literally, revision that I had done in my mocks just suddenly came to me in that exam and really helped me so much. So yeah. Tip number 3 is just to focus fully in all of your lessons. Really pay attention to what your teacher is telling you. Don't chat with your friends. Put your hand up to answer questions. Put your hand up to ask questions, and just engage with your lessons, because if you do this, there is going to be so much less that you need to revise for, because you're not going to have to learn content. You already know this content. It's so important, especially in year 10, because even though you think, oh, I have so much time until my GCSEs, I'm not in year 11 yet, if you don't pay attention in those lessons, that is the basis of all your knowledge. And if you don't know that, then you are going to struggle so much when you are revising for your exams. So just pay attention in your lessons. It's such an easy thing to do, but something that sometimes you forget is important as well. Tip number 4 is to do your homework on the day that you get it. Do not let your homework pile up. Don't do it the day before it's due, the night before it's due. Honestly, that is the worst thing you can do, because you are already stressed enough with exams that are coming up and revision that you should be doing and so many other things that you're trying to balance. And the last thing you need is to realise that you haven't done the homework the night before, or have homework which is overdue, and all of this stuff just piles up, which is just not helpful. I actually have a video on my channel about how to keep on top of all of your homework, so if you want to watch it, I will link it down below. Tip number 5 is probably the most important tip I'm going to give. If you're going to take anything from this video, it is this. And it's something that you should avoid doing, and for some reason a lot of study tubers seem to recommend doing this, and I just completely disagree. Do not waste your time on notes. Notes are the worst thing that you could be spending your time on. Now, I understand that some people revise from your notes, but in my opinion this is the worst revision that you can do. Okay, so my thinking behind this is that if you need to recap something that you don't remember that you did, for example, in a history lesson, and you're like, oh, but if I have notes, then I can revise from those. Well, why don't you just use your class notes that you made in the lesson? Because surely that will have all the information that you need. And reading notes, the only reason why you should be just reading as a form of revision is simply if you've just forgotten a topic and you need to just quickly recap before you actually do your active revision. And surely you can just use your class notes for that. And if your class notes are really bad, like mine were, then just buy the textbooks. And that is actually a whole separate tip that I'll talk about a little bit later in this video. But honestly, I just think notes are a waste of time. There is no way that you can use notes to revise. There's no way of making them active. Even highlighting is just not an active form of revision. I did this in year 9 and I completely regretted doing it because it came to my end of year exams and they were useless. I'm so glad that I did make that mistake in year 9 because in year 10 and year 11, I just didn't make notes. Honestly, I think it's the most pointless thing that you can be doing for revision, and please take my advice, because when I was actually sitting in my GCSE exams, that's when you finally realise what revision actually was relevant to you and was actually efficient and useful, and notes were useless. And I'm not just saying this, a lot of my other friends realise this too. So tip number 6 is to make flashcards as you go along. I'm not saying make flashcards after every single lesson, because we all promise that we'll do this and then we don't, but as long as you're doing them every month or so. What I mean by making flashcards though are flashcards that can actually be used for revision. So for maths, for example, creating equation formula flashcards, so the cosine rule and then on the back just the cosine rule. That is a really simple flashcard, and all my flashcards for maths were like that. I would just have the equations on them. But I also did some for circle theorems and surd rules, but just little things that you can easily test yourself on, that you actually need to memorise in the exam. Those should go on flashcards. And for other subjects such as science, where it is very content heavy, make flashcards which are really simple. For example, the stationary mobile phase, then I just write what the stationary mobile phase were in, colours, and they're very simple. What you shouldn't do is just write notes on the back of the flashcards like this. This is what you shouldn't do, because when you're revising and you're looking at your flashcards, if you're just seeing this, how is that going to help you? Like, what are you going to do with that? You can't just learn and recite paragraphs in your exam, because the questions aren't even phrased in that way. Very quickly though, I will be making a ultimate revision guide of all the revision methods that I found worked for me for every single subject, essentially what revision resources you should be making and what revision will actually help you for your exam. So if you do want to see that video, then please do comment down below to let me know that you want to see that, and I will definitely make it for you as soon as possible. Tip number 7 is use your specification. And if you don't know what a specification is, then you should go and find out what it is. So first of all, find out what your exam boards are for each of your subjects, especially if you're in year 10. The earlier you find this out, the better. So for example, there's AQA, EdXL, OCR, etc. And all you need to type up is the subject, the exam board, and the specification, and it should come up. And normally it's a really long PDF. If you could print it out, it would be really great. But obviously, if it's too long, then just have it on your computer or your phone. The specification is just every single point of information that could come up in your exam. Especially for science, whatever's on the specification is word for word what could come up in the exam. Now, not everything is going to come up, but if you know all of the specification points, then there is nothing else that you need to prepare for the exam. Now, it's not extremely useful for every single subject. For example, for history, it wasn't as good, or same thing for English, it wasn't as relevant. But for things like science, geography, and maths, it is a lifesaver. So find your exam board, find the specification, and use it for your revision. Tip number 8 is to buy textbooks for your GCSE subjects. So especially for things like maths and science, I would actually really recommend to get textbooks, because if you're anything like me, my class notes were pretty rubbish, and instead of wasting your time making notes after school as revision, just get the textbooks. Anything that I forgot in class, or even some things that teachers didn't explain well to me, I would just go to the textbook and read through the information really quickly. And often the textbooks, especially if you get the CGP ones, will have little questions at the bottom of the page that you can do. It's quite an active way of revising, using the questions in the textbook. But I won't be getting them for A-level, but I think for GCSE it is quite useful, because you have so many subjects, and by just having the textbooks, you just have the basis of all your knowledge, and you can just use that to create any flashcards that you need to make, and also to use the questions on there and whatever. If financially it's a little bit too much to get all the textbooks, which I completely understand because honestly they are quite expensive, try to get the CGP ones because they tend to be cheaper than the actual exam board ones, or try and get them secondhand because you can often find them quite cheap secondhand. The 9th tip is just to be consistent throughout all 2 years of your GCSEs. If from the very beginning of year 10 and the very beginning of year 11, you are handing in all your homework on time, you are engaging in the lessons, you are revising a little as you go along, you will have it so much easier when it comes to exam season because you've already done all the hard work, and honestly you will have so much less to do in terms of revision, and also just even in the exams you will just have it so much easier. Then the last tip isn't really a tip, but it's more just a reminder that you will not get the top grades immediately. In year 10, don't expect to get 9s and 8s. That is not going to happen. In year 10s, I was getting 4, 5s, 6s at max because you just haven't reached the most difficult content yet in order to get those highest grades, and your teachers just aren't going to give you those top grades. At least that's what happened in my school. Once you get to year 11, you will then start to see your grades drastically improve, especially after your mocks. I found a huge improvement. Just as a little example, at the beginning of year 11, for chemistry, I was on a U, the absolute lowest grade you could get. And honestly, I was feeling a little bit like, how am I meant to get a good grade in my GCSE exams if I am in year 11 and I'm on a U? But what I didn't realize is that you are going to improve so much as long as you just keep working hard and consistently. I ended up getting a 6, which is a B, in my December mocks in year 11, which is only a few months after I got the U. And then for my final GCSE exams, I was extremely close to a 7, but I didn't hit the grade boundary, so I ended up with a 6 for my GCSE grade, which I'm still, happy with. It's still a good grade, but as you can see, I improved so drastically. And so yeah, just don't expect to have top grades immediately. Those top grades will come with time, and as long as you just keep working hard, you'll achieve the grades that you want to achieve. So yeah, those are all the tips that I have to give. If you are going into your GCSE years, then please don't panic, and honestly just start to get excited for back to school, because GCSE years, as much as they were so stressful, it was actually kind of enjoyable at the end of the day because you have less responsibilities at this point. You don't have to be revising every second of your life, and you actually have time to have fun as well. I really enjoyed my GCSE years overall, now looking back. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that these tips helped you and are useful. Good luck if you are starting year 10 or year 11. I'm sure you'll do amazingly well, and have a lovely week. Bye!